the voice for humanity.
Hello, everybody. I am Dustin Pickering, and this is the New York Parrot Literary Corner. Today we have Amrita Valan. She's a writer from Bangalore, India, ranging from hospitality industry, BPOs, and as a content creator in deductive logic and reasoning in English. She is currently a stay-at-home mom to her two boys. Her work has been published in many anthologies and online journals, which include Poetica 2 and 3, To Be or Not to Be a Writer, the Poet's Grain and Fire Anthology, the Inspired Volume 7 and 8 Anthology, The Alien Buddha Wears a Black Bandana, among many others. Her poems and stories have been featured in Spillwords, Cafe Lit, Cafe de Senses, Shot Glass Journal, Oddball Magazine, Modern Literature, Indian Periodical, Potato Soup Journal, Literary Yard, Poetry in Places, and Portland Metrozine, among many others. Her new book, Avadurchi, is a debut collection of 50 poems about arrivals and departures, farewells and hopes of reunion, love, loss, grief, and the recollection. And it will be out May 7th, which is 3 days ago, 2021. So thanks for joining us today, Amrita. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Dustin. And I beg your pardon about missing out Transcendental Asylum. I'm sorry.
Yes, Transcendental Press is my press, and then Harbinger Asylum is the journal we put out. That's and yeah, we published you recently in there. The last edition that just came out spring 2021.
I just missed that. I don't know how. I just missed mentioning that in my bio.
Quite all right. That's all right. It's Harbinger, okay. We mentioned it now.
Now I remember Harbinger Asylum. And yes. Transcendental is the name of the press.
Transcendent Zero Press, yes. So, what are some of the themes you explore in your new collection, Avadurchi? We mentioned we gave a kind of fair list, but maybe you could talk a little more in depth about what you're exploring there.
Yes, I'm Indian, as you know, so I took a foreign title deliberately. I took Arrivederci, which means goodbye till we meet again. That's mainly because when 2 years back my mother passed away, I started realizing that I take loss very badly. So all along, I've been losing grandparents, then friends, then and when my mother passed away, it was I felt time to write. So. It's mostly, the book is about goodbyes, how to handle goodbye. And that a goodbye is never really a goodbye because the memories are more alive after the person is gone. And in fact, I just realized that some of the objects that are left behind by a person, which was inconsequential when that person was alive, becomes almost like imbued with the life. And I mean, all these things played upon me. So I felt compelled to keep writing poem after poem about mainly missing my mother, dealing with her loss, the inability on my part to say goodbye from Bangalore, slipping into a coma. So, of me, all these things, I felt that this will help others also because there are plenty of repressed emotions which we don't, give into. It's not pragmatic in real life to keep mourning forever. But what if that is all you can do? What if every poem, for 2 years, I could not write a single poem in which my mummy didn't feature. She would just slip into it, even if it's a poem about politics, if it's a poem about current affairs. And I almost despaired of ever being able to write. And then I decided, let me finish off with that part. And then Arrivederci meant that, the farewell is not final. Maybe there is a hope of another meeting, if not in physical form, but as energy, as in some way or other beyond our comprehension. that gives comfort. That is enough. I mean, we cannot do more than that for ourselves. So the poems that are in this book are about goodbyes, hopes of meeting, love which is tinged with loss, not exactly, not happy, settled love, but always
Right.
about grief, always recollections. And the last, towards the end, there is a poem which is just a dream sequence. Because sometimes it makes, I feel that this life is a dream sequence. We're not aware of.
So is it sort of like the poetry was unraveling a lot of what you're saying, repressed emotions that were underlying prior to your loss, and so they kind of, the grief is I know from my own experience as well that you start to have a lot of self-reflection, and when you're in the memory of that person kind of becomes a comfort as well as almost a torture in a way. It's like a very strong longing you feel. Right. So does that go into the poems as well, or do you feel that that was part of those emotions that were
Totally
encompassed?
totally goes into it. There is not a single poem where I'm not, contradicting myself. One moment celebrating her life, and the next moment the loss that I know you don't get over it, you live with it.
Right.
So
Right. So how does being a mother yourself affect your poetic output?
they're, my boys are now 11 and 12 years old, so they're on the verge of untying the apron strings totally, and I'm one of those helicopter parents. So
Mm-hmm.
every moment, like I have always been, like I've got these ambitions that there must be somebody. And mummy's passing away again, that helped me realize that my mother never had any expectations of me, none at all. None at all. So somehow, I'm wiser for that. So I toned down all my expectations that they're human beings. They are on this earth with a purpose of their own. And that is all that matters. I am not there to expect things from them, but uh, to support them. So in my poetry to my sons, I write to them also.
Mm-hmm.
I just when they were younger, I would write poems about how mommy would become a star and they really believed it. So they used to point up at stars and say, "Is that your mummy now?" And I realized that you should maybe not spoon feed them like that because nobody is really sure of where people go or what happens. So now when I write poems about them, I tell them to play it by the ear, let it be, let it come as it may. If you have to, there'll be people who will. They're very fond of their grandfather. So the thing is to treasure what interactions, what memories you have had with them, not to keep missing eternally. So I don't know if I'm able to explain this.
Right. I think that's interesting. So you when you say don't have expectations, obviously you mean you're not trying to drill into your kids some kind of you know career plan, or like you're letting them kind of flow into their life, and you losing your own mother kind of helped you realize exactly what the meaning of that is, what the meaning of motherhood is. That's quite a deep sentiment. Does it find its way into Averdirty, or is it something that's just very private to you?
In
Or
Arifidati, exactly, I don't recall writing a poem where, I have counseled my sons. That is still happening. It's an ongoing process. Like very recently, I got furious with them and I was thundering at them. And then I took a look at the photo of mummy on the wall and I thought, but she never raised her voice at me. She was
right.
one of the unusual ladies. There are very few like that. I am very human, very fallible. But
Mhm.
my mother was of a different, I mean, maybe the previous generation, they were so much more patient, so much more tolerant. So I
Right.
just one look at her photo and I hugged my son and said that Renatita would have never shouted at you, and I'm sorry. And this sort of made my In fact, I've written about this in the memoirs that is, I'm guest blogging for one blog. So there, it features there, but not in this book of poems. It's a very late realization. The poetry was already written. So in that book of poems, I write more about some poems about loss, about love, uh, even a bit of nature poems also, because being a first debut collection, I did not want to only focus on farewell, because who would want to read poem after poem about loss and farewell? So in between, there are a few poems where I celebrate nature, because everything helps when you look up at the sky and you imagine that at the far end of the horizon she is looking down. If a bird is flying away, you feel that a part of her spirit. I mean, if the rays of sunlight fall on me, I feel she's sending the sunlight down to me. And miracles like that have happened. Like I'm sitting at my son's school waiting for him to come out, and tears fill up my eyes at a sudden memory. And suddenly, on a perfectly cloudy day, and I'm not making this up, this happened to me. I'm sitting under the shade of a tree, and everywhere around me it is cloudy. It's looking like it will drizzle, and suddenly just the area around my tree got lit up by a ray of sunlight, very bright. It was like, and then it's maybe my unconscious, maybe my subconscious, but I have got dreams which seem to be from my mother, forbidding me to cry, forbidding me to mourn like that. So the meaning of life gets revealed only when you get very close encounters with losses like that. And that, finally we will all reach the end of our journeys. But what if the journey is, like a spiraling outward exponential progression into betterness? Something much better than what we are having right now over here. So these are the realizations, and I hope I've been able to put some of that in my book of poems. Because when I write, I don't plan and plot it out that I don't have a target audience that I'm writing for. I write because I cannot sleep. I get up in the night at 2 o'clock and I start writing till 4 a.m. So then later I look back and I edit and I revise, and whatever happens, it's like instinctive. I feel that this is a poem and this is not.
Right. So what poetry do you read, and how does that influence your own poetry? Do you have any favorite poets?
T.S. Eliot.
It's Eliot.
From childhood, from almost babyhood, I got hold of all. My mother was a linguistic honors student, so I have Keats and Shelley. I discarded Shelley almost immediately. All Shelley lovers, I beg your pardon. That's me. I cannot help it, and I liked Keats immediately. I liked all the romantic poets, and then I found T.S. Eliot, and I forgot all about the romantic poets immediately. So. Yes,
do you
I like things to make sense. I like people who intellectually engage, and not truth may be beauty and beauty may be truth. But we don't go around in our daily lives only thinking of truth and beauty. We deal with, those sooty yellow apartments and grimy smoke, and are leading our lives in our creaking beds. Like I'm sitting on a chair which might break. Things like that. We have so many hurries in our daily lives. And I like realism in poetry. And when you read my poems, you might think she made that up, because some of my poems are very airy-fairy. I go into trances about the beauty of nature. But then I come back again. This is the dichotomy within me that even I am not able to explain. So, but after finding T.S. Eliot, there was no other poet that appealed that much till I reached Maya Angelou and Adrian Ritz. So, because there was a strong need for feminism in my life at a time when, in India, you tend to feel that men have the upper hand. This feeling comes across that we are expected to be soft-spoken. This feeling comes across whether or not. No one will admit it because it's a difficult subject, but it comes across that if you raise your voice, you're not a lady, but nobody tells a gentleman you're not a gentleman because you raised your voice.
Right.
Is that making sense? Like
Mhm.
when people say you're graceless because you have openly, I cannot explain this, like
Like there's more
it's a
expectations
matter of
on women.
somebody parking a car wrongly and you sticking up for your husband and you raise your voice and you are immediately told that you're a lady, you must not raise your voice. These
Mhm.
kind of expectations that come, parcel for women, you're always very wary. You must not make the wrong impression. You must maintain a certain image. But
Right.
when I read Maya Angelou, that she just broke down all of it. I was in,
Mhm.
I think, my first year of college. So I used to walk down to USCFI library, the American Consulate Library. I would miss my lunch break to just sit there and read because I didn't have access to that book. Our college syllabus was about T.S. Eliot, the Romantic poets, but American poetry, at least at the BA level, I didn't have access to it. So these
Mhm.
were very new to me. So I liked Adrian Rich, May Sarton, then Maya Angelou, and I kept all the liking to myself because that was my part. Art. So I
Right.
was always a rebel. I was always a rebel, though I look very timid. I won't look like a rebel. I'm not raising flags. I'm not sloganeering anywhere. But
Mhm.
my mind is very independent. So you cannot just tell me I am supposed to behave in this manner. I will always ask that why. And that
Mhm.
even that but why can irritate people. So you're expected to know why. We shouldn't have to explain it to you. We've brought you up in a certain way. You should know why you're supposed to
Right.
behave in a particular manner. So this but why can get very irritating with people. So
Hmm.
I feel when I read the poetry, I felt, oh, there are plenty of people who think like me and express it so much better than I could.
Mhm.
So that is when I had thought that if I have a daughter, I would name her after Maya Angelou. I had sons. So, I thought of because I'm married to a Christian, so my sons are anyway. They have Western names like Luke Anthony, James Reuben. So I had said I would combine, Angelou, Adrian. That would be the names of if I had a daughter,
Mhm.
because the way she wrote, the way that was exactly the way I felt, but never thought of expressing myself.
Interesting. Would you like to share a poem with us?
Which mine or
One of yours.
one of mine?
Mhm.
Thing is, I haven't selected one of mine, or rather,
Just pick one. It doesn't not too picky. Something that you feel was
does it have
good that you
to
like.
be from Arvidachi? Because okay,
To our viewers
can
out
I
there,
just
you're watching New
take
York Parrot.
one
Hmm?
minute to look at the
Yes. Yes. Feel free. I'll just do a little
no,
segue.
I've got the poems on.
Okay.
No, I had selected a poem and I changed my mind because I just read it out in another Zoom meeting. So I want to take another poem, but and at the same time I want that poem to be from Arrivederci only. So
Anything you'd like to read?
just might have to be another poem because I don't seem to. Okay, I'll read a different poem because I cannot find a poem from Arabic here. It is on my Mac actually, and this interview is happening on the Mac. So I don't know how to open another window without maybe closing the interview by mistake.
You're watching the New York Parrot Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering. We have Amrita Valan.
You can ask me something else. I'll find it immediately. I will because I've got in my page, but
just take your time. So we talked about Maya Angelou. We talked about Audrey and Rich, and how they influenced your mind into, you felt that they had spoken better what was in your, I guess, in your heart and soul. So how do you recognize that in a poet? Does it just resonate a certain way? Is there a feeling you get, or is there like a mental apprehension maybe, or something? How would you describe uh, your reaction to a poem that just speaks to you?
Of another poet, poem by another poet that speaks to me.
Yeah, how do you recognize when a poem speaks to you? How do you recognize that? How does that make you feel?
Yesterday, I read this poem on social media. It was by a poet called Niharika Jo, and it was called Breath. And I literally started crying because she wrote very rationally without any excess use of emotions. But each verse about breath, each verse described a different aspect. One about corona, one about her suffering father who has asthma, how she managed to save his breath in time. And then in the very final, in the penultimate verses, she spoke about George Floyd. So how he was deprived of breath for this last 7 minutes or so, 8 minutes. I'm not sure of the exact time. But yes, when a poem speaks to me like that, I start literally shivering. It takes me time. If it is really good, it takes me time. I cannot, react immediately. So I come back to it later to put my comment. If it is that good. Yesterday it felt that good to me. So if you're asking me about current poem like that, if you're asking me about one of the classics, The Last Ride Together by Robert Browning, that was one poem which affects me each time I read it, every time. The Last Ride Together, because there's a tempo, a pace to the ride of the horse, in which the lady and her lover are riding, and they know it is their last ride together. So each verse, every verse, like when the feeling of the poetry is brought out by the movement of the poem. So the last ride together. So that poem has special meaning to me. So that is.
I think Emily Dickinson had an interesting phrase where she said,
I love Emily Dickinson also.
Yes, she's excellent, isn't she?
I love E. Cummings. I love poets who say it is okay to be a nobody, that you don't have to be somebody.
I'm nobody, who are you?
There are two quotes who say, I will misquote Dustin, I'm not good at quoting. But the gist of it is that E. Cummings says it's very difficult in this world to be who you really are, because everybody is trying to put labels on you.
Right.
The toughest act is to remain who you are. And doesn't Emily Dickinson say something very similar when she says it is very dreary to be a somebody, croaking like a frog in a bog, and it's much better to be a nobody. And but don't dare tell others you're a nobody, because you'll become a persona non grata immediately. That kind of. So see, I cannot quote it, but the feelings that stay with it. I love both those poets also.
Right.
I found a poem it is not about arrival or departure, but it is in the book Arividachi.
Okay.
Because in the last lines will make it clear why it is in that book. Shall I read it out now?
Yes, please.
Sorry, I kept you waiting for so long, and then I'm asking.
It's okay. It's okay. We had a nice little talk while you were
Very
searching.
first interview in my life, so I don't know the ways of. I'll just carry on.
Mhm.
Black. The poem is Black. Alan Johnson recently was kind enough to make a video out of it. So I'll post that video later on my wall. But this poem had meaning for me again. She wore black on her sepia skin. The sable gleamed. The night skinned of deception. The lady, big black eyes, wide, openly dreamed. Her eyes, jet castanets, looking inside. Her smile, a cut-piece job, a knife stab that cried. In self-wrought corners, a pocket universe pondered. Pristine sunlit lawns, happy cavorting kids. A strong man helped her with odd jobs. At night, they lay on their backs, looked up at the stars, and he chose the brightest one for her, till she forgot how to weep, recited poetry in her sleep. The lady wore black crepe, thinly disguised skin of dark, magnificent schemes, absorbing a magnitude of munificence from mere mundane things, realizing her soul, growing her own wings, daring to show what cannot be seen.
Excellent lines in there that are tantalizing and kind of makes you think, when you rhyme weep and sleep.
My poems, there won't be full happiness in it. There will be a question mark which you may fill with your own experiences. What I dare not show may not be what you dare not show. So
it's beautiful. It is really is. It's very nice.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Just come to me, and if it's dark, I've noticed most of the poetry comes to me if I switch off the lights, because it makes it. The mind's eye awakens or something. So sometimes I'm not sure of why I'm writing when I'm writing it. All I know is that
happens to me too. You're never really totally conscious when you're writing. Your mind kind of is entrenched in something else. You go into
come to my mind which I didn't know was part of my vocabulary. I actually have to Google to look at it. Why on earth did I use this word? And to my surprise, it exactly fits the mood of the poem sometimes.
Yeah, there's some. I think there's some studies done about memory and writing by hand. I think that somehow writing, your memory just kind of like activates. Maybe something you're not conscious of in your daily life comes alive in a way, and just brought into the poem.
I'm writing about somebody very shallow. And suddenly, there was right now, I've again forgotten. It just comes and it goes. As I wrote the poem, the name of that person, who specializes in the bling kind of jewelry, that Italian designer. Now I cannot remember his name again. I've forgotten. It just came. It became part of my poetry, and I was like, "Who is this guy, and why has he entered my poem?" So I went and Googled him, but it is in the Friend episode where Joey wears this very flashy bracelet, and he forces Chandler to wear a same brother bracelet, and it comes from the house of. I cannot. Would you remember the house of? Extremely, somebody who wears those flashy kind of, and that thing must have stayed in a corner of my mind. I'm so sorry that I cannot remember the name of that person. It's famous, the house of.
Interesting. So it's almost like a dream, because my grandmother used to tell me she dreamed of this house. And then she finally one day was driving around and she saw this actual house that was in her dream, and she had never been in that place before. So it's almost like a very similar experience. I guess writing, and I've made this comparison myself, the writing and poetry especially being like a dream state. You go into a trance and you find things that you never knew you knew, or you find things
This
that,
happens to me all the time. What you said
yeah,
about
it's interesting. It's very interesting.
when I dream of verandas I've never been on, or like I mean, I've dreamt of. I cannot possibly imagine a situation from World War II. So I've
Mhm.
dreamt I'm a prisoner of war and being made to cross sandy deserts. I mean, why would I dream of that? I really don't have any idea. So maybe our subconscious mind just keeps references which are interesting and sort of
Mhm.
keeps them away, stores them, and then maybe for some symbolic reason, walking through a desert is important to me, and out it comes. So I actually remember being a prisoner of war in a desert during the Second World War, and a
Wow.
prisoner of the Italian soldiers, not the British, but the Italian soldiers. Very specific, not the British, not the German, but the Italian.
Maybe like thing, that kind of was brought to life. Interesting.
Maybe I have a big brother, so maybe I read his Commando War comics, or maybe
Mhm.
I had a Reader's Digest collection of stories from World Wars. So
Mhm.
God knows what exactly influenced me, but all I know is the dream came much later. It was not a follow up of reading those books. So probably what is important, our mind just stores it away, and we don't know it is important till later, much later.
Right. So the meaning develops out of time
Out of experience, out
and
of life.
experience.
So
Right.
is there a higher part of our mind that recognizes that this will be useful in our future if time is not linear, but
Mhm.
if it is circular, then maybe we know and we store it for later, for the time when we will need it.
Right. I think so. I think that's very true. It's the metaphysical concept of
Because our
cyclical
brain is
time.
not confined to just our brain box. It seems all
Right.
our brains are interconnected. So
Interesting. I think that that's definitely true, and I think poets definitely have that spirit of mind that you're talking about. Especially, I don't think most people. I mean, maybe some people out there recognize that a part of themselves, and that poets seem to bring that alive. It seems to be a very active part of our mental vocabulary, I guess you could say, or our mental activities. This imaginative capacity that we're not
not
familiar with on
logical,
our.
but maybe of a higher order of logic. Maybe I don't know. It's not
I don't
strictly
know.
logic, what we store in our minds or what.
Right. We have about 5 minutes or so left in the interview. If you want to discuss, like, do you have any plans to promote your book, like readings, Zoom meetings, anything you want to promote for the readers or the listeners out there to take a look, be prepared to keep an eye out for it?
Yes, I'm looking forward to my editor, Mr. Reese Hughes. He said that he will conduct an interview of me, and I
Mhm.
think the magazine he guest edits for. So that is one interview. He will let me know when it happens. I don't know when exactly. So recently, Fairfield's Scribes magazine asked me. They sent me a questionnaire, interview in a questionnaire form. So I mentioned my book there also. So when it comes up, I'll post the link to that. And other than that, I've been taking the suggestions of all my friends who they said that you should take a poem or two from your book and post it. So I'm trying to do that. Mr. Johnson's videos helped a lot because he has dramatized my poems and made them come to life. In fact, sometimes I feel that he has found more subtext, more meaning in the poem than maybe when I wrote. So I intend to like sporadically share those poems also on social media.
Mhm.
His video renditions of the poem. Maybe that would be a good idea because many people are visual. So pictures speak more than words to them,
Mhm.
and then they come to the words. So
Right.
that maybe it would be a good idea, but beyond that,
Mhm.
I don't know. If I get an opportunity, I'll definitely collection. So I would want to promote it. So Nobody would want their first baby, to the baby to die. So I would want to.
Right. It's very difficult. It's really tough to sell poetry, but it's
One
it
lady
inspires your creativity.
bought my books. I must buy you, but all four of them. She said that she will present it as gifts on birthdays. And I was so charmed by the idea of, some distant lady or gentleman in America who does not know who Amrita Valan is, because I'm a nobody. I'm an unknown poetess. I'm not, so it would be such fun, maybe he wouldn't read. But maybe one day his 12-year-old daughter will take my book down from the shelf and I am dead and gone and she'll be reading. That kind of a notion just charms me so much. Though she
Mhm.
assured me that all her friends are poetry lovers and will read my book. So, because that is how I became a bookworm in the first place. I used to climb up on my daddy and mommy's shelves, take down very heavy books which they have forgotten about, and then spend the whole day, whether it is King James Version Bible
Mm.
or whether it is, yes, all the Reader's Digests that my daddy used to read that he bound very carefully, and then he forgot all about them. They were in the top shelves. So I would be the one bringing them down. Then he would get alarmed that, a 12-year-old girl is reading maybe unsuitable material. So I finished reading all the James Hadley chases by the time I was 13. That is because
Wow.
I had a 16-year-old elder brother. So I was uncensored. Sometimes I think being uncensored is a blessing because even if you don't read age appropriate material, if you have a good upbringing, if you have good family values, you know what to sift out and what to retain. So I read No Orchids for Miss Blandish when I was about 13 years old. I don't know if it was the right age to read or not. So, though I don't
Right.
allow my own sons, I don't.
That was my experience while growing up. Is as I had all these books around me, and they're my grandmother's. I grew up with my grandmother, and she never really, for some reason, was drawn to them. They were interesting to me, and I would just read a little bit
I
here and
also
there.
I can put the bed and read because I was aware, even if my mother not being well, maybe she would not notice, but my daddy would. So
Out and I'm thanks for joining us at such short notice. To our viewers out there, subscribe to our channel if you enjoy our content.
thank you
And
so much, that then I hope my acting was clear and you will not, it was intense, not stable. So
yes, you did a very good job. It's excellent. I enjoyed it. You broke up a little bit in that last moment there, a little bit of a technical difficulty, but I caught some of the last bit of what you said. But yes, it was an excellent discussion. And so I hope that people will subscribe to our channel. And if you have any money to donate out there, people out there, if you know $5, $10, $100, whatever you have available that you would like to, if you would like to donate, it's paypal.me/nyparrot is our PayPal account, and which will be going to new equipment and so forth. And thanks, viewers. Thanks to our subscribers and viewers as well as to our guest today, Amrita. And please keep an eye out for more interviews in the future. Thank you. And this has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering. Have an excellent, excellent evening to yourself and do some reading.